In fact, there has been proposed to be anywhere from 4 to 13% increase in risk of breast cancer for every 10 grams of alcohol consumed. How much is 10 grams? And what they'll sometimes tell you and what you can find in the literature is that ingesting 10 to 15 grams of alcohol a day, so that would be like one beer in the US or one glass of wine, is the same as smoking 10 cigarettes a day. But the point is that the more alcohol people drink, the greater their increase of cancer, in particular breast cancer.
One of the really bad effects of alcohol, but that's extremely well documented, is the fact that alcohol, because of this toxicity of acetaldehyde and the related pathways, can alter DNA methylation. It can alter gene expression. That can mean many things in different tissues, but it is associated with a significant increase in cancer risk, in particular, breast cancer, and in particular, because breast tissue is present in both males and females, but in women, it's especially vulnerable to some of the DNA methylation changes. Well, breast cancer in women has a relationship to alcohol intake, and alcohol intake has a relationship to breast cancer in women.
In fact, there has been proposed to be anywhere from 4 to 13% increase in risk of breast cancer for every 10 grams of alcohol consumed. How much is 10 grams?
Well, we need to think a little bit about the variation in the amount of alcohol in different drinks across the world. Different countries serve different sized drinks and have different concentrations of alcohol in those drinks. So without going down too much of a rabbit hole and just giving you some good rules of thumb to work with, there have been studies of the percentage of alcohol included in different drinks and the sizes of different drinks that are served in different countries. And here's kind of a patchwork of those findings. In Japan, 1 beer, 1 glass of wine, or 1 shot of liquor, as it's served there, tends to include anywhere from 7 to 8 grams of alcohol. In the US, 1 beer, which generally is 12 ounces if it's in a bottle, 1 glass of wine or a shot of liquor tends to include about 10 to 12 grams of alcohol. And in Russia, 1 drink of the various sorts that I just described typically will have as much as 24 grams of alcohol because of the differences in the concentration of alcohols and the sizes of drinks that are poured in these different countries. Okay, of course, there are other countries in the world. Those countries are also vitally important, but those are the ones that I extracted from the studies that I could find. What does this mean? Well, what we're talking about is that for every 10 grams of alcohol consumed, so that's 1 beer in the US, maybe a little bit more than 1 beer in Japan, or basically a third of a drink in Russia, there's a 4 to 13% increase in risk of cancer. That's pretty outrageous, right? And you might think, wait, how could it be that? You know, this stuff is even legal. It's a toxin. It's also a toxin that people enjoy the effects of. I mean, in the US at least, they tried prohibition. It certainly did lead to a reduction in alcohol-induced health disorders, in particular, cirrhosis of the liver. It also led to a lot of crime because it became a substance that a lot of people still wanted and that people were willing to break the law in order to provide, or I should say, to sell and provide.
But the point is that the more alcohol people drink, the greater their increase of cancer, in particular breast cancer.
And that's because of the fact that alcohol has these effects on cells that include changes in gene expression. And cancer, that is, the growth of tumors, is a dysregulation in cell cycles. Right, a tumor is an aggregation or the proliferation. Aggregation is stuff sticking together. By the way, proliferation is stuff duplicating. A proliferation or aggregation of cells that could be a glioma. Glial cells, glioma brain tumor, right, it could be lymphoma, so within the lymph tissue, etc. The mutations that alcohol induces to cause this are wide-ranging. Some of those are starting to be understood. For those of you that are interested in cell biology, I'll just mention that the PD-1 pathway, again, this is super specialized and for the aficionados only, you don't need to know this. The PD-1 pathway seems to be upregulated and we knew this from the discussion earlier. There's a downregulation in some of the anti-inflammatory molecules that help suppress this proliferation of cancers. Nowadays, there's a lot of interest in the fact that the immune system is constantly combating cancers that exist in us all the time. You know, little tumors start growing and our immune system goes and gobbles them up. Little tumors start growing. The immune system senses inflammation, sends out these incredible cells, these killer B cells and T cells, and beats them up. Cancers proliferate and take hold and cause serious problems when the proliferation of cells exceeds the immune system's ability to gobble up and remove those cells. There are other mechanisms of regulating cancers, but that's one of the primary one, and alcohol hits it. Again, it's a two-hit model. It increases tumor growth and it decreases the sorts of molecules that suppress and combat tumor growth. So, again, even low to moderate amounts of alcohol can be problematic for sake of cancers, in particular, breast cancers. Epidemiologists and health specialists love to try and compare different substances in terms of how bad they are. Rarely do they compare substances in terms of how good they are, but sometimes they do.
And what they'll sometimes tell you and what you can find in the literature is that ingesting 10 to 15 grams of alcohol a day, so that would be like one beer in the US or one glass of wine, is the same as smoking 10 cigarettes a day.
It's hard to make that direct relationship really stick because, it's a question of, how long people inhale. Do they have a predisposition to a lung cancer, etc.? But even if that number is off by plus or minus 2 cigarettes, or even if that number was the equivalent of 1 glass of wine equals 1 cigarette per day, I think there's general consensus now that nicotine consumed by vaping or by cigarette, it's bad for us in terms of lung cancer and other forms of cancer.